What is up, YouTube, and welcome to the 2-week out mark. We are currently sitting at 13 days out from the first show of the season, which is wild, absolutely crazy. I mean, if I think about it, this is kind of like the last hard week of training before we get into our taper strategy as of next week, which as of next week, I will be uploading a video after the first competition, going through, the peak week strategy, show day, everything like that, which I'm ultra excited about. But yeah, we're currently sitting at 13 days out from the first show, which is the NPC New South Wales Naturals. The weekend after is the NPC Pro Qualifier in Taiwan, and then 2 weekends after that is the WNBF Malaysia show. So basically in today's video, I wanted to do things a little bit differently. I actually wanted to jump into a little bit more of a mic'd up training session, which first mic'd up ever training session. We'll certainly see how this goes in terms of coordinating intensity and, recording in the same time. But yeah, very excited to jump into that. Basically, my programming is, if you've watched the previous videos, it's a collaborative piece between both anterior and posterior. So basically I run 3 posterior days, 2 anterior days, posterior chain being a collaborative piece between, more pulling based exercises, so back bias, in collaboration with, lower back, glutes, hamstrings, also some delts and arm accessories thrown in there too. And then my anterior chain day is more a matter of presses, pushes, so shoulders, chest, and then also like more quad bias in nature in terms of lower body, squat patterns, leg presses, things like this. So today's training session is basically going to be my first anterior chain day. It is a little bit more of a lower body bias. So we've got, adductor work, we've got, quad biased, pendulums, we've got leg presses, etc. And then we get into our upper body pressing movements, finish off with accessory work for, delts, triceps, and a bit of abs as well. So yeah, super excited to jump into this training session. Basically, yesterday was a refeed day, so we are operating off a little bit more carbohydrates running into this training session. At this point in time, especially upon the last 3 days of depletion, one kind of like top up day is certainly not adequate to really revive the physique, so to speak, but it does give me a little bit more energy going into this workout. That's essentially what I'm programming myself to believe at this point. What the mind perceives, the body achieves. So yeah, super excited to jump into this workout. Let's jump into it. All right, we are commencing with a seated pin-loaded leg extension to start this workout. Now, typically in terms of contest prep, particularly through more squat-based patterns and quad bias movements, I do really enjoy starting the workout off with some more isolation. So we're gonna start off with the pin-loaded leg extension, really just to warm up the knees, warm up the quads, and ensure that I'm able to get to a good state of mental and physical readiness before I get into my primary lift for today, which is the pendulum. And I find going from essentially a foam rolling exercise or a warm up straight into my heavy lift, I find that more mental and physical arousal is required of me. So I do find that starting the workout off with some isolation to commence, it's just a really good way of warming up the knees, warming up the hips before getting into that primary lift. So this particular leg extension, the Gym 80 piece, I do find that I quite like it actually. I'm able to set the seat quite far back, and with the pivot of the leg,
the leg piece, sit it really high up in terms of towards the glute, which enables me to really bias that more, lengthened portion of the lift, which is quite nice. On this particular piece, we're performing additional half rep in the lengthened position, so it's essentially a 1 1/4 rep. And that's because I can max this machine out with weight. So I add that additional half rep just as a means of adding an additional progression in the mix. But let's jump into this first movement of the session. Let's get it. That first set felt pretty damn awesome. Last week I was basically hitting reps of 8s with that weight, 95 kgs. And this set we hit a rep of 9. So the goal over the next 2 sets is to also replicate that. If we can hit 2 more sets of 9 repetitions, I will be pretty damn happy. But let's jump into the second set now. Fuck. Woo. 9 reps. Let's get it. 1 more set. Moving into the last set. Let's get it. 9 reps. That's the goal. Oh, spicy, man, that burns. All right, moving into the second exercise of today, we have the seated pin-loaded adductor machine. Now, I'm a big fan of coordinating the adductor at the start of a workout. I feel like it's an area of my physique that I've really had to focus on within the off season. And truthfully, most of my off season, I ran the adductor machine at the start of the workout, just as a means of getting in, nice and fresh volume, means of biasing that particular target tissue at the start of a workout, which could lend to more favorable volume and set quality. So basically decided to continue that through the course of this contest prep. And for some individuals who, I guess, jump into two isolation exercises before their primary squat pattern, there might be a loss in strength to that that primary lift. But for me, interestingly, I find that I'm just more warm, and it actually lends to more productive sets and volume. And there's not really a whole lot of trade-off when it comes to reduction in intensity or even the weight that I'm using within those key sets. So it's definitely been an effective strategy for me to maintain through the course of this contest prep. But yes, let's jump in now. With this particular piece, I am also capitalizing on some additional length and portion of the repetition. I'm maxing out this machine for traditional repetitions, so I'm actually performing an additional 2 half reps in the lengthened position. So it's basically a bit of a triple, like a triple lengthened rep. But it's been very nice to bias that stretch position, and man, it feels good. So let's jump into this. Oh. So first working set done. As you can see, 3 working sets on the seated leg extension. We're also doing 3 sets on this piece as well for those triples. And last week got 13 reps. So if I'm counting correctly, I believe that was 14 there. So I mean, if we can maintain 2 more sets at 14, I'd be pretty damn stoked. But yeah, additional half reps in those lengthened portions, man, that burns very nicely. If you've not tried and sort of played around with additional, half rep, quarter reps, I think it's a great way of spicing up the training a little bit, and perhaps biasing the lengthened portion, which may lead to more benefits when it comes to hypertrophy. There is quite a bit of research looking at lengthened bias training and how it can be beneficial. Doesn't seem to be beneficial for all tissues, however, so something to keep in mind. Maybe certain muscles respond more favorably to lengthened bias work. But yeah, let's jump into the second set now. One more. Quick dismount. Because that stretch position. So I usually find by the second exercise now, starting to feel a little bit more mentally, physically ready within the workout. As I mentioned, sort of jumping straight into my first, hard working set on a pendulum. I feel like I'm not mentally there just yet in terms of the physical and mental state that I need to be in and to perform well. So starting the workouts off with some isolation certainly provides, favor in that regard. But one more working set, 14 reps is on the card for this one. Let's get it. 3 rep PB, 2 weeks out, 13 days out. So pretty stoked for that. All right, let's get it. 14 reps. Oh, last one. Oh. shit. Whew. Knee sleeves on, and big fan of knee sleeves, especially SPD knee sleeves. These things are phenomenal and so durable. Honestly, you buy a pair, these things will last you for years. But I guess the utility and benefit of running knee sleeves is to provide a bit of cushioning around the knees, which I think can provide favorable support and also, you know, warmth as well. And considering getting into extremely low levels of body fat also means a reduction of adiposity around, you know, joints. Just the extra 1.5 centimeters or close to of neoprene support behind the knee certainly provides good cushioning, you know, and support, because there's a whole lot less fat mass around the knees, you know, when performing squats, which does lend to a little bit more in the way of range of motion, and is potentially, you know, why there might be a drop off in performance associated with squat patterns for a lot of individuals. I typically find presses and squats movements that are a little bit more affected through the diet condition, but that is no excuse. We still send it. Third exercise, we have our primary squat pattern for today. We have our pendulum squats. Now I am running 2 sets on this piece. For first set is a like a top set for a set of 8. We're gonna go for 3.5 plates. And then we're gonna run it back off for some pause reps and basically run a bit of an AMRAP. So yeah, I do like this particular machine, do like the Gym 80 piece. My only qualm is that the stopper at the bottom is not low enough. So my full range of motion, I do hit the bottom. And what I do have to run is 2 pads on the shoulders to give me just a bit of extra range of motion. But with that on, feels great. And yeah, this is actually a movement I've only started running for the last 2 weeks now. I'm typically fond of, you know, not rotating out exercise in the last portion of contest prep, but the hack squat, which I was running previously, was taken 2 weeks ago. So I didn't have time to wait around. I jumped onto the pendulum and honestly, it felt phenomenal. So I was like, maybe I run this for the last couple of weeks, which I have, and it's felt awesome. So, you know, we're keeping it in. But let's jump into this. That felt pretty good. Hips are feeling good, nice and warm, ready to go. Let's load this. Gonna start with 1 plate. Jumping into our second warm-up set, and then we're gonna jump into our top set. So let's jump into this. Just 5 reps to warm up there, but let's load this bad boy. 3.5, let's go. Top set. 8 reps. Let's go. Oh Oh, we can do one more. Let's go. Oh, fuck. 10. How good. 2 reps up on last week. Whew. That felt good, actually. Yeah, managed 2 extra reps on that first working set. And perhaps it's the video recording. Need to record myself more often. I might hit more PBs. But that felt really nice. And certainly those the extra padding just allows that extra range of motion. I don't know if it could be heard, but I even hit the stopper just then, even with the foam padding as well. So certainly it's needed on this piece just to add a little bit extra range of motion. I'm sure I'm able to get all the way into the bottom of the position. But yeah, pendulums are certainly one of my favorite squat patterns alongside hack squats. These are typically the two that I'm oscillating between in both the off season and and contest prep as well. So yeah, I have to get used to looking at the actual camera and not the video of myself. So I apologize for that. But yeah, let's jump into this second working set now. We've got to back off. So basically going to reduce the load down to around 55, close to around 25% reduction in load, and pause reps, AMRAP. Let's go. All right. Fuck. 10 reps. Whew. All right, so we are jumping into the 4th exercise now, which is a single leg press on the plate-loaded machine. Now, typically I'd run this as a more linear press. The particular Gym 80 piece that I'm about to use, which is more like the squat press. I'm not a huge fan of it, just because of the way at which it run racks, and there's not really a whole lot of placement of the hands to get nice and stable on the bench. But of course the machine is taken, so that is totally okay. We've got to be adaptable and respect others in terms of where they're at within their workouts, and I'd never want to pressure someone to wrap up their sets early just because I need it. So still need to be adaptable in that regard, but still getting in a single leg pattern here, which we've maintained through the course of contest prep thus far. I don't really want to rotate out the movement for anything else, but we'll be adaptable in terms of the piece. So plate loaded machine here, single leg, 2 sets on this, 2 sets, and you're probably thinking, okay, relatively low volumes here, 3 sets, 2 sets. Certainly towards the back end of contest prep, I find volume management is something that's important when it comes to managing fatigue, and especially a couple of weeks out. Need to make sure I'm maintaining an adequate stimulus to hold on to lean tissue, but also not burn the candle at both ends, especially upon some of the finer aspects of digging, in terms of the deficit. So yeah, let's jump into this first working set. 12 reps. Let's go. The crawl out. Whew. Okay, first working set in the books, and actually felt pretty good. I don't really run this piece very often, but yeah, like I mentioned, there's not really a whole lot of placement for the hands in terms of stability, and I feel like most machines, you know, that you perform for irrespective upper or lower, you know, always want to make sure that you're nice and stable on the machine. So if I feel like I'm lacking that stability, I feel like I'm not able to, you know, place force through the platform, you know, of the leg press and gets the most out of the movement. But yeah, actually felt surprisingly quite good. Try and keep the reps relatively constant on this piece, just because I find, you know, you can start taking really long rest periods in between. And I mean, you saw my pendulums before. The sets go upwards of, you know, 1 minute. And I feel like ensuring that there's some sort of degree of cadence across the movements is important. And we're not just, you know, taking prolonged rest periods in between each rep as a means of progression. But yeah, let's jump into this second working set, last set. So we've got to make this count. Let's go. Ooh, 1 rep up from the last set, 13. All right, 13 on this one, let's go. Whew, fuck. 2 sets, 13, 2 rep PR. Pretty happy with that. And glad that's the leg component out of the way. Whew. Next up, we have our pressing movements. Like I said, happy we've wrapped up the lower portion of this workout. However, it was very productive. We hit a few PRs at 2 weeks out, 13 days out. So excited about that. And again, have to remember to look at the camera lens instead of the screen here on the DJI. But the next movement we have is the plate-loaded seated pec fly or chest fly. And again, similar to the lower body, running isolation before my primary press, which is going to be the plate-loaded incline piece, just as a means of ensuring that my pecs, my chest, my shoulder girdle is nice and warm before we do jump into the first primary movement. Again, this is something that I've utilized in the off season, but mostly contest prep, just as a means of really ensuring that I'm nice and warm before I get into my key lifts, just because there is a little bit less stability around these joints towards the tail end of prep. So making sure, yeah, we're nice and warm before we do get into this. Quite like this piece actually. yeah, I feel like I get a really nice stretch on it. And you know, through that scapular retraction, nice chest up positioning on the bench, I feel like I'm able to really nicely pre-stretch the chest before I get into my working sets. And of course, because of like the leg piece that I can press down on, it enables me to be able to pass the weight to myself and get into that really nice stable position from the get-go. So let's jump into our working set. So we have 3 working sets that we're doing on this. Gonna aim for around 12 reps with 15s on either side. So let's jump into it. Nice, that was 1 rep up. So probably gonna maintain the load on this for the second working set, but that felt nice. You know, nice chest up, scapula pinned down, back and down, and that promotes that nice like pre-stretch position of the pecs. Enables me to get into the nice lengthened position much easier, and it also helps in stabilizing the scapulars, you know, against the rib cage, which can certainly lend very favorably to encompassing more tension awareness, you know, through the chest there, through the pecs. Second working set. Let's go. That felt good. 1 more set to go, and then we're going to move on to the plate loaded incline press. Last working set. So we didn't quite hit 13 on that last working set. That was the 12th rep that we were about to hit. Felt a little bit short of that, so 11 reps in total. That is totally fine. I'm still up in terms of total reps, in terms of volume on that piece. So still a PB for this particular exercise. But that felt good, and I feel like the pecs are nice and warm now before we get into our primary press movement. So we are jumping into the plate loaded incline press. Now this particular piece is hammer strength, I believe, and it really biases the top portion, which I'm not a huge fan of. I find the lockout to be incredibly challenging on this high incline press, and so what I sort of do is I don't try to lock the piece out completely because I find it feels a bit awkward on the shoulders, but there actually isn't a lot of incline variants in this particular gym. So I'm running on my other anterior day the Smith machine incline, and then running the plate loaded incline for this particular workout. Now I should also give a quick shout out to Gangster Wraps, and obviously I'm a huge fan of like knee sleeves, but I also use wrist wraps, which I think most bodybuilders would do, to be honest, when it comes to their primary press movements, just as a means of taking a bit of pressure off the wrists. But I've used Gangster Wraps for as long as I can remember. The actual Gangster portion has has fallen off, but I've had these for like, God, years. And honestly, they're so durable. So quick shout out to them. Not a paid sponsor, but wouldn't mind being. But yeah, let's jump into this piece now. Probably gonna look at running 2.5 plates for around sort of sets of for 8 repetitions. Certainly not like an all-time PR for me on this piece, but strength is retained relatively well in terms of performance within contest rep constraints. So I'm pretty happy, with that, especially it upon being my second, movement for today in terms of pressing. So let's jump into that. So I find even though I've done a couple of obviously sets beforehand on the pin loaded machine, I still think it's important to do a couple of warm-up sets on this piece, just because I think I'd rather be safe than sorry. So let's jump into this. Cool. So I'm feeling pretty good. I feel like I can pretty much jump straight into my first working set. And as I mentioned, we're gonna go for a set of 8 for 2.5 plates. All right, first working set. Oof. I also find sitting a little bit further forward on the seat just enables me to angle my torso a little bit more favorably to the incline angle that I want to facilitate in terms of my arm, the degree of arm flexion. Just because this particular piece is a super incline press, so it almost feels somewhat anterior delt if I don't sit a little bit more forward on the seat there. So don't feel awkward about adjusting your positioning on a particular piece to fit your levers a little bit more favorably, or the angle that you want. So let's jump into this. 8 reps in total. Let's go. Felt good. But as you can see, in terms of the positioning, I'm not really fully locking the arm out at the top, just because I find that lockout so damn challenging. Just because of the moment arm. So obviously as the machine pivots upwards and levers upwards, as the plate gets further away from its axis of rotation and the more horizontally aligned it is, the greater the moment arm and the harder the movement becomes. So considering that, I guess, when selecting your pieces is important, I think, from a program design perspective. But to also just understand, why certain portions of the lift feels harder than others, which all comes down to, biomechanics, really. But that felt pretty good. We've got one more working set of that for a set of 8, and then we're basically going to run a back off. And the back off is basically 25% reduction in load and performing an AMRAP, so as many reps as possible on that piece. So I think my training split is certainly something that's a bit different from your kind of standardized, bodybuilding style hypertrophy training split, whereby a lot of individuals, especially males, would sort of oscillate between either like a push-pull lower, upper lower, or muscle group, base split, or even like, 3 uppers, 2 lowers, maybe with some sort of like push or pull bias, or maybe like quad bias or hamstring bias in terms of lower body. And me running sort of full body training, not technically full body, but anterior, posterior, has just been a great way of me managing my training volumes and ensuring that I'm able to bias a little bit more, posterior chain, which for me, the off season has really been about trying to build up the back, which was a weakness for me in my last season. The hamstrings, glutes has never been too much of an issue in terms of development, which is good. But certainly the back, adding more volume there, and so running a 3 times frequency for that has been very favorable. And it's kind of why I've run that particular training split. You know, and I think initially moving away from this sort of standardized hypertrophy, 3 upper, 2 lower kind of, you know, split was certainly something that took a little bit of mental adaptation. We sort of get stuck in our ways, but I feel like it's lent very favorably to making some, you know, great improvements within this off season, and then holding on to those improvements through the course of the Qantas prep. So yeah, it's been good. But let's jump into the second working set now. So we've got 8 reps that we are aiming for. Let's get it. Ooh, 9. Ooh, nice. So now we're essentially performing our back offset and looking at reducing that load down by 10 kgs either side, and basically going for an AMRAP on this piece, which, I mean, if I do look at my training log, just to kind of see what I'd done last week, I had done a set of 10 with 2 plates aside. So that is the goal, is to try and strike at least 10 reps on this piece. But so far, that is a volume PR. So we've got to try and hit this 10 reps, and that'll be a volume PR across at least 2 working sets, which is, yeah, pretty damn good, considering we are 2 weeks out from the stage. But I think one thing that I've realized through the course of this Qantas prep is just how mindset can be such an important friend or foe when it comes to your performance within training, and letting your mind kind of seep too much into the diet condition in terms of, you know, woe is me, and sort of setting yourself up for failure. I think in training is having that mindset where you preconceive that your performance is going to decline, and, you know, going into the course of Qantas prep with the mindset of my performance is going to get worse, and, you know, it's going to worsen through the course of Qantas prep. You know, I feel like it's almost fabricating that for you. Whereas if we're going to each our workouts with an increased level of optimism that we still have the ability to retain performance well and protect it, then I think it's something that we can, you know, facilitate. You know, another way I think that favorably looking at progression within Qantas prep itself is that if you are at least maintaining your performance through the course of prep in terms of lifting similar loads for similar reps, but you are progressively getting leaner over time, then essentially your strength to weight ratio, you know, is improving, you know, and that in itself can be a form of progression. It's interesting how, you know, the dynamic in terms of off season, we look at plateauing as essentially being a bad thing, and we look at it from the perspective of Qantas prep. Plateauing in terms of lifting the same, you know, weight from the previous week, in essence, it's actually a form of progression in terms of strength to weight ratio. So I think that is an important consideration when looking at the logbook and the numbers, you know, from that perspective. But let's jump into this last set here. We've got 10 reps to get. Let's get this. One rep up. Let's go. So we're moving into our next exercise here, which is actually rear delts. Single arm crossbody, length and bias rear delt fly. And the way in which I set up my torso angle here, which I'll go through in a moment, I think is very favorable to biasing the rear delt in a little bit more of a lengthened position. And I think the rear delt is one of those muscle groups that requires an extra level of sort of finesse to train properly, because scapular retraction can often take over the movement, which biases a little bit more of that mid-back and that rhomboid. And so we aim to actually keep the scapula nice and locked against the rib cage, or at least locked into position. And the primary, I guess, movement that's occurring is more so around the shoulder joint itself, rather than the actual, you know, scapula. So let's jump into this. I typically set my cable up around sort of, you know, at least shoulder height here. Grab onto the cable, hold onto the machine there, and I pre-stretch the delt here by letting my arm traverse across the torso, and then I basically rotate my torso away. So I'm starting that position in a really biased and almost a stretched position of that rear delt. And then from there, we're essentially horizontally extending from there, keeping that scapula nice and locked in place. And this feels phenomenal in terms of loading that rear delt. So 15 reps on each side there. Whew, that felt good. In terms of my current delt volume, we're currently sitting at basically 2 exercises for a side raise, 2 exercises for rear delts, and I don't really do any overhead pressing actually. I find that I get most of my anterior delt volume just from my horizontal pressing. It's never really been an area that I've had to bias a lot in terms of bringing up. So not to say that there's, you know, no utility to overhead pressing. I certainly think there is in biasing more of that anterior delt. And I think it's very favorable in terms of volume allotment, particularly for females that don't do a lot of horizontal pressing, you know, in bikini and divisions like that, excluding obviously figure and some of the more muscular divisions that do require, you know, pec development. But yeah, not a lot of delt volume in my program design, as well as arms. You know, three exercises, 3 working sets, delts, two exercises, 3 working sets. So it's certainly volumes that I would push up a lot higher for athletes that do require, you know, adding more tissue to that particular aspect of the physique. But for me, my volume allotment is certainly a lot more towards, you know, back development, as I did mention. But 3 sets of this one. Yeah, let's jump into it. Next working set. You'll also notice that the range of motion is relatively short. So in terms of positioning, mostly sort of biasing across the body and then just past, I guess, neutral in terms of, you know, shoulder positioning. We're not sort of fully horizontally extending, because I think the further we start horizontally extending from the shoulder, the more we have the ability to start adding in, you know, scapular retraction. And I think if I want to really just focus on biasing that rear delt, you know, I'm going to focus on just movement from the shoulder joint as opposed to incorporating, you know, scapular retraction there as well. I got to say, the music in this gym is pretty cool. Obviously got my headphones in, but it's certainly a bit of a downer when the gym music when you walk in is so not vibing. So I'm lucky Gold's Gym here at Hippering has some pretty cool beats going. All right, let's get into the last working set. 15 repetitions, pre-stretch that rear delt. And yes, we are doing both sides. We have our second last exercise for today, a lying dumbbell skull crusher. I'd say the skull crusher out of a lot of the tricep movements is probably a movement that is least favorable for a lot of individuals because of like elbow discomfort. For me, I've never really had a whole lot of elbow discomfort with tricep variations, luckily, touch wood. So it's been a staple for me in terms of my program design, as well as like French presses or like overhead tricep extensions as well, dumbbell cables, and try and utilize a couple of different shoulder angles in order to perhaps facilitate a little bit more of, you know, biasing the lengthened portion in an overhead position for triceps, and also like an elbow by your side position. So this particular tricep variation, obviously a little bit more into shoulder flexion, stretches the long head of the tricep a little bit more, not fully because we're not completely overhead in terms of positioning, but I do think utilizing different shoulder angles can be beneficial when it comes to, you know, tricep growth. And certainly adding in variety from that perspective as well, not just getting bored with the same movement in terms of positioning. So yes, let's jump into this. 12 reps. I believe last week we struck 18s for 12 reps for 3 sets. So that's going to be the goal for this particular exercise now. Let's jump in. Whew. So I do find on the tricep skull crusher, you would have noticed that on the bench, I sort of angle my body a little bit more towards the end of the bench. And that's just really as a means of trying to get myself into a position where the dumbbells are not bumping the top of the bench, and allows me a little bit more range of motion. And also find in terms of positioning, if I have my elbow position not necessarily 90 degrees in terms of angle, but a little bit beyond 90 degrees, I find it just takes a little bit of pressure off the actual elbow joint itself. And that can be a tip for individuals that do experience a little bit more discomfort through the elbow, especially in that more like lengthened position, is just allowing the elbow positioning to be a little bit further back. Might just take some pressure off. So yeah, that's certainly a tip that I've utilized to improve my comfort, my skull crush. But 12 reps on that one. The goal here is to facilitate another 2 rounds, 12 reps, and would have matched performance from the previous week. So let's jump in. All right, match performance on the second set. We got one more set to go, and we would have hit our PR for volume for last week as well. So, whew. Last working set for triceps. Let's go. 10. Oof. Ah. Lost a couple of reps on that piece, on that set. That's all right. You win some, you lose some, yeah. In terms of training, sometimes you facilitate, you know, PRs earlier on in the piece, and actually, you know what? That is a progression. Ha! How good. We hit 12 with 18 on the first set. Second set we struck 18 for 12, and then last week was 9 and that was 10, so actually is a progression there. Make sure you check your logbook when it comes to your training. That's why it's important to track your lifts. So we're moving into our last exercise. Man, this light does make me look extra transparent, translucent in terms of my beautiful tan. But this exercise here is a weighted knee tuck. So we're doing an abdominal exercise to finish off. I actually rotate this exercise twice in my programming. I really enjoy it, so I duplicate it up and perform it twice within the week on both anterior days. The utility of this particular exercise is I want a bias a little bit more hip flexion. So, you know, if I wanted to target just the rectus abdominis, I'd stabilize my hip positioning and I'd really just focus on thoracic flexion. But in this particular movement, I am more encouraging flexion of the hip, and there is some flexion of the torso as well. But another aspect of my physique that I wanted to kind of bring up in the off season was my sartorius, you know, pretty much the longest muscle in terms of our human anatomy. And I feel like it really completes the front shot for the quads alongside the adductors. And, you know, we do get a little bit sartorius with like hamstring curls, like lying hamstring curls as an example, because it does also act as a synergist and flexion of the knee. But I do think it's a muscle group that's a little bit more challenging to bias unless you're performing hip flexion with maybe a degree of external rotation of the hip at the same time. So by holding a dumbbell between the feet, it kind of creates some isometric external rotation at the hip because I've got to really clasp the dumbbell, and then I'm encouraging that hip flexion at the same time, which I think nicely biases the sartorius. I certainly feel a burn in that aspect of my physique. So it's something that I've really enjoyed performing and retaining in my programming. But let's jump into that now. Oh, God. Whew. So you can see in terms of how I perform it, not just focusing on simply flexion of the hip, you know, creating a V positioning of my hip angle. I'm also abducting from the knee at the same time whilst keeping the feet together. And it does create a little bit of external rotation at the hip at the same time, which I feel like enables me to bias that sartorius, you know, a little bit more within the movement. So, you know, don't shy away from perhaps being a little bit experimentative when it comes to exercise selection to try and bias the aspect of the physique that you wish to, you know, target, because it certainly can be beneficial, I think. But 2 more working sets to go on this particular piece, and I'm pretty sure I struck sets of 20 on this for 3 working sets. So that's the goal of this. Try and match that performance from the previous week. Let's go. So we have one more working set to go on the hip flexion, and no posing today. So in terms of posing for me, as you would have seen, perhaps if you watched the previous videos, I do try and get in some posing on most training sessions, or at least 3 to 4 times a week. At minimum, I basically practice my posing on my posterior days, so Monday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And if I can get in some additional posing practice, obviously that's beneficial as well. But I standardize posing for at least 3 times at minimum a week. And then I'm also practicing my posing in the morning on a Friday when I do some check-in photos, and also on a Sunday as well with photos too. So I guess it is multiple time stamps within the week that I'm practicing posing. And I feel like posing is one of those things that you need to treat similar to anything else. When it comes to training, when it comes to nutrition and tracking, you got to standardize how frequently you do it, or else it can be something that I feel like can kind of fall to the wayside, particularly as contest prep becomes more and more challenging, over time in terms of the energy management perspective. So if you've got it blocked in your diary that you're going to practice posing on these certain days of the week, and you even standardize what you do in those posing sessions, I think is really important. Whether it be 3 rounds of symmetry, 3 rounds of muscularity, 3 rounds of your posing routine. Obviously it's going to be different depending on the division, so the category in which you're competing in, but I feel like that's an important piece when it comes down to managing all aspects, or what I consider to be the 5 pillars of contest prep, which is basically training, nutrition, sleep, steps, and posing. There, those 5 pillars. But last working set, let's jump in. Finne. And that basically wraps up the first anterior body day, and the first of hopefully many mic'd up training sessions as well. I think it'd be pretty cool to do some mic'd up training sessions when I'm overseas, and also in peak weeks as well coming up. So hopefully next week be able to get some cool training sessions in, and pump up sessions whilst in Sydney, capture the entirety of peak week, or most of it. I'll try and do my best, and then capture some international travel, pump up sessions, all that jazz, moving into our international season. So super hyped for that. But yeah, that basically wraps up today's training session. If you love today's session, please give us a subscribe, and honestly appreciate everybody's support through the course of this contest prep. Trying to document more of the process, more of the journey here, because I feel like it's important to capture this sort of stuff, especially from the perspective of memories. It's so, contest prep is one of those things where you honestly blink and all of a sudden you're peek back into the off season again. And for me especially, even reflecting upon my last season, I feel like I didn't really capture enough of it. And unfortunately I've only started to capture more aspects of my prep towards the tail end, within 5 weeks out or so. And I probably should have done this more earlier on, like shared more of the journey thus far. But we'll do my best to obviously share the next leg of it at least. But yes, appreciate you, and we'll certainly see you in the next video.